Number 10. Kalmanskap, Namibia, the one town the desert ate. Kalmanskap sits where the desert meets the bones of empire, a hollowed heartbeat in the Namib, one of the planet's oldest deserts. Once a glittering town of marble floors, electric lights and German orchestras, Kalmanskap is now a town of sand, dunes moving through windows, stairwells packed with grit, ballrooms half buried, pianos whose keys protrude like the teeth of a fossil. This is the story of a place the patient insistence of nature swallowed whole. The landscape around Kalmanskap is ancient and severe. The Namib Desert stretches more than 1,000 miles along Africa's southwest coast. Winds carved it long before humans arrived. Daytime heat bakes rock into dust, nights freeze that dust into glass. Vegetation is skeletal. In this environment the smallest human enterprise is a temporary disturbance. A single season of extraction, once profitable, looks absurd beside geologic time. Kalmanskap's life began with a glint in the gravel. In 1908 a railway worker named Zacharias Luala, maintaining the Lutteritz-Bogenfels line, found something shining, a diamond. News of jewels spread faster than wind across sand. Prospectors rushed inland. By 1912 the settlement had a distinctly German character, brick homes with verandas, a hospital with the region's first X-ray station, a ballroom for Sunday dances, a tram system, and imported furnishings. Wealth arrived and with it the trappings of metropolitan life, electric lights, tailored suits, a bowling alley, a bathhouse. Photographs from the 1910s. But Kalmanskap's golden thread was brittle. Diamond seams are not endless, richer fields were discovered elsewhere and prospectors followed the profit. By the 1920s the town's boom had crested. Families packed trunks, trains carried fortunes and possessions away, and the steady hum of domestic life became sporadic and then silent. People left in stages, first the wealthiest, then the practical, and finally those who could no longer mask their doubt with hope. As houses emptied, the desert began a patient inversion. The desert does not rush. It creeps. It takes through tiny betrayals, a grain of sand slips through a cracked window, then another, the mortar erodes where a seam allows grain to collect, a nighttime gust tests a threshold and shoves more in. Over months and years those small intrusions become rooms filled with sand. Staircases vanish under dunes. Number 9. Port Royal, Jamaica, swallowed by sea. They called it the richest, wickedest city on earth, the place where gold glittered and men sold their souls for rum and coin. In 1692 Port Royal was a world apart, a sun-baked, rum-slick island town that sat like a jewel at the mouth of Kingston Harbor. Pirates, privateers, smugglers and merchants mixed with clergy and colonials, the narrow streets rattled with cannon, coin and laughter. Men built fortunes in wooden houses raised on pilings above shallow reef, and then they danced on those planks until the ocean took the music. This is the story you do not tell with postcards. It is a taste of salt, rot, and water that takes its time learning how to pull a city under. If you want your viewers to feel the damp chill of coral-encrusted bones and hear the echo of last screams, keep your voice low and steady. Let the images breathe, barnacled timbers, a cart half sunk in mud, coins rolling beneath silt. Port Royal did not die in a single moment, though a single night finished what decay was already beginning. Nature reclaimed it viciously, with water working like a slow, cold hand under the town's feet. The town grew from a spit of sand and rock. Port Royal occupied the end of a curved ridge at the mouth of Kingston Harbor, where coral reef sheltered anchorage and trade. In the 17th century the harbor was a magnet. Spanish and English fleets moored here. Privateering, state-backed piracy, was a business model. Men like Henry Morgan and Jack Rackham made fortunes. The city chimed with taverns, brothels, merchant warehouses, and the brickworks and storehouses that served trade with the New World and the Old. The town's wealth was a living, breathing thing, ships streaming in, hoisting chests of Spanish silver to be fenced out, fast men exchanging rumors, women bartering in the lanes. Contemporary writers called Port Royal a law unto itself, prosperous, ruthless, and rowdy. Everything that makes a port thrive, the shallow lagoon anchorage, the coral bars that deflect open ocean, the dependence on wooden piles and raised platforms, also makes an ocean town fragile. Port Royal's houses weren't set on bedrock so much as on timber stilts hammered into lagoonal muck and sand. The town grew in a precarious geometry, warehouses and taverns teetered on piles above the sea, the streets were boardwalks and causeways. Number 8. Hashima Island, Gunkanjima, the battleship island that time, and the sea, forgot. They called it Gunkanjima, Battleship Island, because from a distance the concrete carcass looked like the silhouette of a warship cutting the grey sea. Up close it is worse, terraces stacked like prison blocks, windows that were once eyes now black hollows, stairwells eaten by rust, and concrete ribs flaking like exfoliated bone. Hashima was man's attempt to pin permanence on the sea. The sea laughed, and then it waited. If you want to terrify, do not begin with explosions or gore. Begin with a fact people understand: cities are living things, heartbeats of people, work, and noise. Then show what silence looks like when everything that made a place alive is removed. Hashima's horror is quiet: hollow bedsheets frozen by salt, schoolrooms full of dust, the hollow clack of wind through empty corridors. Plant the idea early: this island was once so full it overflowed, and now it is a monument to the suddenness with which human confidence can be erased. The first image, a grey horizon, then the sharp, angular silhouette of Hashima. The camera pulls in slowly to reveal tiers of concrete, stacked apartment blocks climbing the slope like the ribs of a dead machine. There's no sound but wind. Let your voice be low, patient, and cold. Hashima's story is not just about abandonment, it's about speed. Nations and corporations shaped the island faster than nature could digest it. Hidden in the teeth of the West Sea, about 15 kilometers from Nagasaki, the island is a reef of 16 acres blasted and infilled with rock and concrete to create a platform where there was only water. The seams of stone and mortar were human hubris arranged against waves. In 1887, Mitsubishi bought Hashima to extract coal that lay under the seabed. By the 1910s the island had beds, shops, a bathhouse, a school, even a baseball field. At its peak in 1959 more than 5,000 people lived on those 16 acres, density higher than many modern cities. Mines ran under seawater. Children played on roofs. Men worked shifts in claustrophobic tunnels and came up to slice the air of an island where living space was measured in centimeters. That the island existed at all is a mechanical miracle: wooden piles, infill, concrete terraces. Imagine apartments stacked on a reef like honeycombs, sanitation systems, muffled factories, the smell of coal and sweat. Number 7. Varosha, Famagusta, the one resort the sea and silence took. They called it the Riviera of the Levant: white sand beaches, neon-bright hotels, terraces where sunlight stuck like coin to polished tables. Varosha, Famagusta's resort district, was a place people came to forget themselves: honeymooners, holidaymakers, and jet-setters who spilled out of cafes at midnight and left their footprints in sand and glass. Then, in 1974, the world bled across Varosha like ink. The resort emptied, doors swung shut on entire lives, and nature and neglect moved in with a slow, patient appetite. What remains is not simply an abandoned town, it is a wound that will not heal. Start quiet. The camera should not scream. It should creep, a slow drone sweep of sun-bleached facades with shattered windows that glitter like dead eyes, a palm tree bowing over a cracked promenade, sea foam licking an empty lifeguard stand. Let silence hold. Varosha's horror is not sudden, it is the soft, accumulating push of salt and rot, and of a human story interrupted by violence and politics. A quick primer for your viewers: Famagusta sits on Cyprus's southeastern coast. Varosha, the beachfront quarter, exploded into modern celebrity in the 1960s, luxury hotels, casinos, and villas with panoramic sea views. The resort's growth matched the post-war tourist boom. It had porticos, promenades and private beaches. Varosha was a postcard: white sands, palm shadows and lively nightclubs where the music went on until dawn. Locals worked there in cafes and housekeeping, families built apartments overlooking the sea. It was a place designed to be visited and then remembered with the sort of fondness that makes postcards and rooms with the keys still in the drawer. Then the summer of 1974. Cyprus split in two after a coup in Nicosia and a Turkish military invasion followed days later. Fear cut across towns in hours. Thousands fled south or were evacuated, others never left their homes. Varosha's residents fled to save their lives, abandoning cars, suitcases and furniture as they went. Unlike many other evacuations, the exodus was abrupt and unplanned. People left with whatever they could carry, closing doors behind them in the belief, some insisted, that they would return the next week. Many never did. What happened next is political and terrible. Turkish forces sealed Varosha and fenced it off, declaring it a military zone. Place. Number 6. Bodie, California, the one gold rush town the cold took. You can feel Bodie before you see it. Drive the narrow two-lane up into the Sierra Nevada, and the air thins, the trees thin, time seems to drift like dust. Then the road spits you out onto a plateau and there, like a memory scraped across the landscape, is Bodie, a grid of wooden frames, sagging roofs, open doorways like black mouths, and streets that remember the scrape of wagon wheels. The town's sign still warns, Bodie State Historic Park, a ghost town preserved in a state of arrested decay. That's a polite way of saying, nothing lives here anymore, the place is frozen the instant it died. If you want to make viewers feel the chill, narrate in a low, deliberate voice. Don't rush. Let silence breath between sentences. Bodie's horror isn't immediate violence, it's the slow collapse of ordinary life into rust, rot and cold. It's the way the high desert keeps secrets for a century and then whispers them back at you. The year was 1859 when prospector W.S. Bode, sometimes spelled Bodie, followed the promise of gold to a windswept hollow near the town now called Bodie. He died that winter, frozen and broken, before the town that bore his name found its fortune. The discovery of a prosperous vein in 1876 turned a lonely camp into a boomtown overnight. By 1880 Bodie was alive in the way only frontier towns know how, violent, ragged, and overcrowded. Estimates vary, but at peak the town swelled to between 7,000 and 10,000 souls. Saloons shouted, shutters banged, men argued over claims and women took in laundry. The town grew with an energy like a fever, saloons, a Chinatown, brothels, a Wells Fargo office, a jail, a schoolhouse, churches and a bank. Bodie's prosperity was sharp and brittle. The mines, load after load, yielded gold and pushed men into long shifts underground. The economics of placer and hard rock mining create a brittle equilibrium, a few veins pay big, but when they dry, the town's lifeblood thins and the ecology of society collapses. By 1882 the richest days were waning. Fires, always a menace in wooden towns, ate buildings. Harsh winters shuttered commerce. By the 1910s people drifted away to more promising camps. Most residents left between 1910 and 1940. They left in stages, sometimes in anger, sometimes in pragmatic resignation. They loaded wagons and trains with what they could carry and let the rest rot. The manner in which Bodie was abandoned matters. Left the set intact. Number 5. Detroit, Michigan, the city that nature and neglect reclaimed. There are cities that breathe, cities that hum with traffic and neon and the keyed clatter of daily life. And then there is Detroit, the husk of an empire whose pulse slowed and, in the silence left behind, nature moved in like a careful thief. This is not a story of monsters and midnight screams. It is a quieter, more terrible thing, how glass and steel, built to last, become scaffolding for vines, how playgrounds turn into ambushes of tall grass, how streets that once hustled with production now listen to wind. If you want viewers to feel that chill under their skin, speak softly and paint with detail, rust blooming on an auto assembly line, a child's bicycle half buried by seedlings, a "for sale" sign swallowing ivy. Detroit's rise reads like an industrial epic, by the early 20th century it was the beating metal heart of America. The automobile revolution, Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, built not only cars but communities. Neighborhoods of brick row homes, schools with proud lintels, churches with bell towers, shops with neon signs, whole lives revolved around shift times and paydays. Assembly lines moved like ritual, the city's rhythm was punctuated by whistle blows and coffee cans on porches. The story of decline is not a single night. It is a long, layered unraveling, deindustrialization, suburban flight, redlining, financial mismanagement, political corruption, and social unrest. In 1940 Detroit pulsed with 1.85 million people. By 2020 the population had shrunk to under 640,000 in the city proper. Whole neighborhoods emptied block by block, street by street. When human presence thins, buildings lose the daily maintenance that keeps roofs sealed and gutters flowing. They begin to leak. Nature finds a foothold. As you tell this, start with contrast. Show archival footage of Detroit at its peak, River Rouge belching smoke, assembly lines perfect as clockwork, crowds around radio stores. Then crossfade to now, a silent foundry with conveyor rails rusted to orange, pigeons nesting in the cab of a half-sunken machine. Let the quiet land. There are districts where the city's decline reads like a slow, patient erasure. East Side neighborhoods, North End blocks, sections of the Lower East Side, rows of two-story brick houses with porches now sag beneath vines and trees. Front yards once mown and tidy are wild meadows. Number 4. Times Beach, Missouri, the one town poisoned into silence. They called it a cozy river town, tidy bungalows, children who played on sidewalks, old men who sat on porches and counted the river's barges, summer barbecues and a slow, soporific rhythm you could trust. Times Beach looked like one of those American places that lasted forever because nothing very dramatic ever happened there. That ordinary trust is the first knife in this story. For Times Beach, the threat was invisible, patient and bureaucratic, a poison spread not by monsters or storms but by trucks and paperwork. It didn't scream when it came. It whispered into dust and into shoes and then, years after the last bale of hay, it took the town down. Open with quiet, a drone glide over a wind-tremored field where grass has gone wild, then a slow push into an abandoned foundation half swallowed by brambles. Don't start with facts. Start with the ordinary things that make an evacuated place eerie, an empty porch swing turning in wind, a faded family photograph cracked in a frame, a mailbox with no letters. Let the silence sit, then let the history creep in like dust on a forgotten shelf. Times Beach began as a pleasant 1920s-era development on the Merrimack River's floodplain, about 30 miles southwest of St. Louis. By mid-century it was a ribbon of modest houses, a trailer park, and a reputation for small-town living, barbers, grocery stores, the odd diner with a neon sign. People who moved there wanted quiet, the river, the local park, kids who could walk to school. That harmlessness is important, it amplifies the horror because the victims were ordinary people living ordinary lives. The town's undoing began in the late 1960s and early 1970s with a seemingly mundane problem, dusty roads. Times Beach's dirt lanes turned to talc in summer and to muck in winter. It was common practice to oil or spray such roads to suppress dust. Municipalities and private contractors would mix oil, or, as in Times Beach's case, waste oil, and spray it over thoroughfares. The goal was simple: reduce dust, keep lungs cleaner, and keep neighbors happy. But in Times Beach one of the components of those sprays turned out to be contaminated with something far nastier, dioxin. Number 3. Aokigahara, the one forest that swallows paths and people. They call it Aokigahara, the Sea of Trees. It sits at the foot of Mount Fuji, a dark belt of forest so dense the sun fights to make it through. Step in and the world changes, the canopy absorbs sound, the air tastes like old needles, and the trail quietly rearranges itself under your feet. For centuries it's been a place of solitude, for decades it's been a place that takes people and keeps them. This is not a story of monsters. It's a story of a place whose shape and silence pry at the edges of the human mind until some people don't come back. Open on stillness, a slow, ground-level push through trunks that stand like pillars. Needles thicken the floor into a mattress that hides roots and sudden drops. The camera breathes with the forest, a few small sounds, distant insects, the soft crack of a twig, then that distinctive hush, as if the trees are holding their breath. Let viewers sit in that silence for a full beat before the voice enters, low, steady.
We are here right now in Aokigahara. This is one of the darkest forests in the entire world.
Aokigahara grows atop old lava flows from Mount Fuji. The basalt is jagged and porous, and when rain falls the ground drains fast.
What the hell?
Trails are thin
What do you think
ribbons
we're
over
getting
a bed
ourselves
that
into
hides
tonight?
caves,
Pebbles!
and caves choked with
Let's
needles.
follow this string.
Compasses sometimes behave oddly here.
See where the
dense
string's
iron
taking
in the
us.
rock can speed
I'm gonna go
lightness.
deeper.
Cell reception drops. The forest's physical layout makes orientation unreliable. Say it simply, in Aokigahara it's easy to become lost not because the forest is clever, but because its bones are confusing. History thickens the mood. The forest appears in Japanese legend and folklore, an older world of eerie, restless spirits, and mountain rites. Stories of Ubasut, the supposed practice of abandoning the frail on remote slopes, touch the imagination, even when their historicity is debated. Cultural memory adds weight. Aokigahara is a place that has collected sorrow over generations. Keep that background short and resonant. These are not horror cliches but cultural notes that make the place feel layered and grave. For modern visitors, the forest's reputation changed in the 20th century. Newspapers and accounts began reporting suicides there. In recent decades Aokigahara gained a grim notoriety. People in crisis have gone into its hush and disappeared. When you refer to suicide, be careful, responsible, and compassionate. Do not sensationalize. Number 2. Angkor, Cambodia, the one ancient city the jungle refused to release. There are places where history ends, and then there are places like Angkor, where history only seems to end. The temples rise out of the Cambodian jungle like the remains of a dream too large for the human mind to hold. Roots split stone. Vines climb towers. Tree trunks wrap around doorways as if the forest is not reclaiming the city, but swallowing it whole. Angkor is beautiful in the way a grave is beautiful, by reminding you that everything made by human hands can be patiently undone. Angkor was once the heart of the Khmer Empire, one of the most powerful civilizations in Southeast Asia. Between the 9th and 15th centuries, kings built a vast ceremonial and political center in what is now northwestern Cambodia. It was not one temple, but a sprawling urban landscape of reservoirs, roads, canals, sanctuaries, and palaces. At its height, Angkor may have supported hundreds of thousands of people. The city was engineered on a scale that still feels unreal. Water was managed, land was ordered, and stone was raised into sacred geometry. For centuries it seemed permanent. That is the first illusion to destroy. Permanence. Angkor was not immortal. It was simply busy. The temples themselves were built with a precision that should have guaranteed survival, but the jungle does not care about precision. Sandstone erodes. Mortar weakens. Roofs vanish. Monsoon rains slip through cracks and widen them. Roots find moisture, then leverage, then power. The forest is not an enemy in the human sense. It is slower than that. It has patience. It waits for one small failure, then exploits it for centuries. Ta Prohm is the perfect image of that patience. It feels less like a ruin and more like a struggle frozen in time. Giant silk cotton and strangler fig trees rise from the masonry like living pillars. Their roots spread across walls, through galleries, and around doorframes, as if the temple is being held together and torn apart at the same time. The tree is both killer and guardian. It props the ruin up even as it breaks it open. That contradiction is what makes Angkor feel haunted. The place is not dead. It is being absorbed. There is something deeply unsettling about architecture that looks inhabited by something else. At Angkor, that something else is the jungle itself. Vines drape over windows like veils. A town that had once been full of music and conversation was reduced to a drowned silence under a lake that spread where it pleased. That silence should be the first thing your narration lets the audience feel. Not disaster. Not chaos. Silence. The sound of a place cut off from the world and sealed underwater.